hit the stores, you gotta check the shelves, you gotta free them all, you gotta let them loose.
Reviews from the basement.
Hey everybody, Chris here, coming to you with my friends at Reviews from the Basement. Very excited for today's episode. We are going to do Reviews from the Basement's first ever video game review, and I'm honored to do it. I'm very excited, and I'm very excited to do it for this game. We are going to review Civilization 7. It is the 7th installment in the Civilization series, if you're not counting some of the other ones like starships and stuff like that. But so if we stick along the main one, we're at number 7. So without further ado, I'd like to just dive right in. I'm going to cover the intro video for the game and then 5 major differences that I think set this apart from previous entries into the series, and that I think are valuable add-ins. Things that I think just show continuous improvement with that organization and its willingness to say, how do we take this storied franchise that is year over year a massive hit and do something different with it to avoid stagnation, like many other video game series fall into. So we're going to cover 5 of those things, some details behind that. Then I'm going to wrap it up with a little bit of a pros, cons, overall feeling of the game, because there are things in there that aren't perfect and I do think are regression. And then we'll see what we can do with the Stag's rating system, if I can match that. I doubt it. It's maybe the best rating system ever made.
It's gonna be hard, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, for the add-in.
It's trash, boo.
Okay, maybe we'll try just a traditional rating system, something color-based, if you will. Okay, so first I want to dive in. The intro video I think is awesome. We stick with the Game of Thrones family, so if you all remember in Civ 6 you had Sean Bean, who is just an amazing narrator. I'm not going to say that Gwendolyn Christie takes it a notch above or anything. I mean, that's a hard act to follow. That'd be like, reading a book after Morgan Freeman releases an audiobook. It's just not going to happen. So, but I love Gwendolyn Christie. I think she does a great job. I think it's cool with that just kind of style of actor, the Game of Thrones thing. The intro video is less about just like this holistic civilization thing like some in the past where it's just giving you a smattering of everything. It really follows a character and kind of ties it into this like deeply philosophical, like introspective approach. He picks something up and he's traveled through time in a circular kind of fashion. There's great music in the background. It's showing the evolution of society. It's really cool. Her voice is just very melodic. It carries you through, kind of sets the tone like, all right, I'm going to be engaged in like different eras, and it just makes sense. So I think they did a great job there. Now, to pop into the 5 major differences, I'm going to cover the leader skill tree, the idea of the separation of civilization / era from said leader, then the growth mechanism versus builder, and the persistent, like the animations, right? So you got like persistent battles, you got camps being set up, things like that. And then finally cap it off with diplomacy, I think is a huge shift compared to games past, and I'm excited to talk about that. So first, we're going to go with the leader, the leaders in the game. I know some people aren't thrilled with the types of leaders that are available. It is what it is, right? Civ's going to come out with multiple DLC packs and gouge all of our wallets, unless you're like me and bought the Founder Edition. And you just do it up front. But there will be more leaders, I am sure. The thing I noticed, I can't remember the exact count, there's like 2 or 3 leaders that have duplicate versions of themselves that have like different approach to the game. I don't know if I'm happy about that right now or not. It takes up a space for a character that I think could have gone to a different leader. But needless to say, the characters themselves, so you pick a leader. My first one, I picked Tecumseh. You go into the game and you get what's a skill tree. And it turns out it's a persistent skill tree. It's not confined to that specific game. So as you progress through the game, you have milestones and things you need to achieve, achievements you'll unlock. These things will give you skill points for your leader. You then use those skill points, and it's a vertical-based skill tree, just like games in the past. It's pretty straightforward. There's like your primary skill, then it opens up 2, then 4, so on and so forth, all the way down. And then there's like an ultimate like hero skill. I did notice that there's a legend skill to be unlocked that I couldn't unlock yet. So I'm eager to find out when that happens, but it's before you get to the bottom. So that one's confusing me a little bit. But anyway, so as you go through the game, like you add these points, you build up your character, and then I finished my game, and now Tecumseh's not a level 1 leader, he's a level 2 leader. So if I were to pick him again, which I did not, he comes into the game with these skills already unlocked. So it's going to create a different experience than it did from the first one. And so I think that's really cool. I think it adds to the replayability of the game overall. And then different leaders are going to end up unlocking different skills. So it causes you to want to try this out more and in different ways. On top of that, when you finish, you unlock what's called mementos. They're like perks. And so I beat the game with Tecumseh, unlocked X amount of mementos. There are mementos that can only be unlocked by a specific leader. When you unlock them, you can end up applying them to any leader, and that's like a boost going into the game. So my second leader, I had +1 diplomatic points and +1 scientific points. So I think that whole thing is really cool, whereas in games past, it just felt like if you pick your leader, you go in, you're going to start, and it was just very easy to kind of fall into a trap of like, I'm going to focus with just this leader and do like militaristic approach, and that's really what I'm going to do, which I think leads right into the next section, which is about the separation of the eras and the civilizations and the ability for that civilization to evolve over time. They took this from Humankind. I got Humankind when it came out. I thought it was really cool. It was a different take on the Civ series, and it added a lot more emphasis on diplomacy. So I thought that was really cool. And the whole idea of like an RPG mechanism built into the leader was different. So good on them for seeing something that looked good and got a lot of attention and integrating it into the game. I think it's cool. I imagine, like, I have a buddy who plays the game who just is like, I'm always America. And I said, you're going to hate this because you can't pick America right away. America is not an ancient civilization. You can become America, but you don't get to pick them right away. So I think that's cool. It adds something. And what they do, the game does, it helps people, beginner, advanced, doesn't really matter. They give you a suggestion like, hey, this is the leader you picked. Here's the starting civilization that you're going to want to choose. And so far, 2 for 2 on leaders, I've seen 2 options for both. And those are to help you pick one that is a little bit more in line with what your leader style is. But you can pick anyone you want. My next playthrough, I'm probably going to pick a completely different style leader, and then I'm going to intentionally pick civilizations as they progress through the ages that aren't aligned with my leader, and just see if it makes the game more challenging or increases the likelihood I'm going to lose, something like that. So I think that's really cool. But you have to, so I picked Tecumseh, and I picked like the Mississippian, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sure Terry can fact check me on that or figure it out, throw it in later. But you start there, and then the next phase, you're going to have the opportunity to, evolve into different empires. And I ultimately ended up evolving into the Mexican Empire to see how that would go. And it was interesting because there's just different buildings that you get to choose. Like you won't be able to build those buildings if you chose the American Empire. You won't have those units. So in the other games where you picked a leader, like that was what you were going to get. This one, it gives you a little bit more mix and match opportunity, and then you can switch things around as you go. But it's not at will, right? You have to progress through the ancient age. Then it goes into the next one, or antiquity age. Then it goes in the next one, and then ultimately the modern age. So when those milestones happen, you get asked again, hey, the antiquity age has come to an end. Here's your choices. This is what you get to pick for civilization. And you got to read through and see what are the benefits of choosing which one or the other. What it's going to do at that point, if you start off with a leader, let's say that's diplomat, scientific. So your milestones, your objectives, everything about that beginning of the game is going to lean towards and steer you towards playing the game in that style. When you get to that age transition, you're going to be presented an option to pick something different. And you can choose like, all right, well, this one's now diplomatic, economic, or this one's militaristic and, exploration, right? Or expansionism. So they end up giving you all these different options. And if you choose one that is kind of a drastic deviation from your previous choice, there's going to be essentially a little bit of a learning curve, if you will, in moving that way. However, you can pick one that's like, all right, I was diplomat scientific. Now I'm going to pick diplomatic economics. So at least I have one continuing leg there that I can build upon instead of starting over. That's how I interpret it so far. Again, I'm looking forward to the amount of times I get to replay this game and have a different experience. So moving on, you get into the game. One of the first things you will come across is that you cannot build builder units. There's no builder units. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think most people would agree. It's just something that you have to worry about that seemingly takes up turns. The idea that your city's growing organically feels more realistic to me. Like, all right, we've achieved this milestone. Our population grew. Now let's acquire more space. I think that's great, and it adds an element to it too, where if here's my little civilization right here, right, then you have this hex up here. If I build this hex, I'm going to expand that way, and I have the choice to continue to build that way when I expand and acquire a new tile, or I can try to even it out. I would recommend that you pay real close attention to what's around you, what kind of enemies you have, what kind of city-states you have, what kind of resources that you have. And don't be afraid to have like a weird shaped city that you're starting, because the resources are more important. You might end up having an enemy that's building somewhat close to you and they build that kind of vertical approach. They can acquire that resource. It seems a lot more strategic to me in that respect from a growth standpoint, as opposed to previous entries, which relatively were like culture and turn based. And so it's like you just focus on a culture, and food, you're going to grow, and it's just going to evenly grow outward. This one, you have a lot more customizing to do, which is cool. It creates unique city layouts and gives you a little bit more of a chance too to focus on defensive strategies. With that persistent even out, it can be kind of daunting to defend later in game. With that, all right, so you get your city, you end up building another town, whatever, but now you're going to go to battle. One of the things I noticed is the animation changes in the game. I feel like the water movement's better. I like the way that the environmental incidents occur and the way that looks better, the storms, things like that. I just, overall, I think it's really cool. Like, I've had blizzards happen, and you see the blizzard, you kind of see it coming. Then when it happens, you see your land covered in snow, and the persistent effects it has on it. It's really cool. The volcanic eruptions are a lot better. I encourage you to take the time and enjoy some of that stuff rather than just button mashing your way through the actions and going to the next turn. Like, take that. The biggest thing I noticed right away is when you're traveling, like say with an explorer early game, which is a whole nother conversation. We can get into what they did with explorers, which I think is phenomenal. It adds so much depth to the game, but we're not going to talk about that right now. You want to rest, right? Because you're either stuck due to lack of open borders. I need a second here and take a sip of. Yeah, we're gonna have to work on that one. We're gonna have to cut that one out, Terry. But I'm gonna take a sip of this beautiful garage beer here. Classic small batch brewed light beer. Beautiful American made deliciousness. All right, so you're explorer. You're gonna stop. You're gonna rest. You need to heal. Whatever. Instead of just standing there and doing nothing, your character, if you watch them, they actually like set up a camp. Temporary camp. They set it up. And I think it just adds a cool element to it. It doesn't really mean anything essentially, right? But it adds an element. On top of that, you engage in battle. Games in past, it was poke. We lose X amount of units. Then they just stand there looking at each other. And this one, if you pay attention, battle happens. We fight. Some losses happen. But there's still clanging of swords and stuff. It's like there's a persistent battle animation that's going on, which makes a lot of sense because they're still engaged in battle. You end up going through the turn progression. It suspends. There's the attack from them, the attack from you. And that's how it works out. So, oh God, that was unexpected. So beyond that, there's your troops. You're moving your troops. You stop them. They're gonna like, but with Tecumseh, there was some like rain dancing and some tribal music playing. If you have a commander, he's going to like bust out like a strategy table and he's going to go over it with his captains or lieutenants or whatever. So there's a lot of cool detail that I think they added to the game that if you just stop, breathe it in, you'll notice it, and it adds to the experience. Last thing I'm going to touch on as far as major differences, to me, diplomacy has been a huge difference. In games past, you could, at least in my experience, you could really ignore that thing, and it had not as much of an impact to the outcome. In this game, it feels like it's everything. You earn diplomatic points. It's how you interact with independents to turn them into city-states. It's how you engage in conversations with your AI opponents or other opponents or allies, whatever. Somebody will approach you and say, hey, we want to enter this cultural agreement, and then you see what the perks are. And if I spend 120 influence, I'm going to get plus 12 culture per turn, which, you know, if that's a track you're working down right then and there, it's very well worth it. But you got to keep an eye on those diplomatic points wherever possible when you're researching cultures, technology. Make sure you're getting that. I highly recommend having a good, healthy amount of diplomacy available. It gives you a little bit more power in the game. And the first playthrough, I didn't care. I was focused militaristic approach. I blew up every independent I came across. I didn't focus on any of that at all. The second playthrough, I'm going a very diplomatic route, creating deep relationships with the AI and with the independents. I think it's really cool. It's adding a different mechanism to it. It does a whole nother thing with trades now too, which again, we'll talk about in another episode, but that's seems like a whole new approach too. They really reinvented trading. I think is great. So I mean, I can't stress enough, diplomacy is key. You really want to focus in on that, unless you're just planning on going in and blowing everyone up and getting into war right away. Then it's not as big of a deal. It still will have an impact, just not nearly as much. So now that we're done with the 5 major differences, I think I just like to summarize this. Overall, I like the experience. I like the game. I'm glad they made the changes. I think it was needed. They were running the risk of having, you know, the Madden effect or something like that, where it's just the same thing with a minor facelift. So they did a lot to make a lot of changes. I know people aren't really thrilled about, you know, some of that. I think people have complaints about UI interfaces and all that kind of stuff. But my pros and cons list is going to go. I'll start with the cons. I don't love the limited customization options in the beginning of the game. For anyone who's played, you'll know what I'm talking about. It doesn't feel like you don't get to turn off turn limits. I think that's not going to change. Maybe it will. But the way this game seems designed, it does seem a little bit story driven and mission based as opposed to geared towards that. Like what I usually like is the persistent gameplay. I really like long games. So for me, that was a little bit of a con. Like, I love that ability to just create a very customized version of the game for myself. I think the inability to, in the tech trees, you used to be able to go, all right, I want to pick navigation, and it's, 5-6 steps away, whatever. I could just pick that, and it would preload all the text I would need to research to get me there as fast as possible. I liked that option. That option doesn't seem to be there anymore. I don't think it's a bad thing because it does force me to look at the game a little bit differently in that respect, but I do think the player should have the choice. I think it's something simple. I don't know why it would be gone. So I would ask that they put something like that back in. It feels like it would be an easy thing to do. And on that note, the last kind of con, I guess, with the whole customizing and the interaction, not being able to have more map options. It feels like there's a lot less map options right now, maybe because it's early, but I just want to know that I can have a little bit more freedom there. I never really cared for the donut or the 4 corners as much, but I did do it because I wanted to see what it would be like. And I think that's going to be an important thing that needs to be added into the game for people who really like to play this franchise through all aspects. So, cons, just to... Holy hell, you're going to have to do some editing, bud. Cons are going to be the lack of quick research in tech tree and culture tree. Like, I just don't know why that's not there. The lack of customizing the game experience. and the reduced number of maps options. I just don't get that. So those are the things that stuck out to me. And I guess most important, after this last update, my game has crashed 3 consecutive attempts at playing. So whatever you did,
unfuck it
and get us back on track. Play a lot harder games on my computer and have no issues. Now I want to hop into the pros. Pros, everything I said and a lot more. I think they did a great job. The game is the game. The core experience of Civilization is still there. Growth, development, multiple options on how to do that. Interaction, trade, all that stuff is there. But they just made so many changes that I think it's hard to pack into one thing or one discussion. And I just think it was a great refresh of the series. I don't know how to list off pros without taking an hour. I would just say there are so many things that have added on. The 5 things I picked, I think, were very cool. I think there's a lot more, and depending on how you play the game, you're going to find other upgrades and things that you find more valuable. My overall feeling of the game, I love it. I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to playing it more than previous entries, and that's saying a lot. I mean, I've been playing Civilization since Civ 3 and played them all. I've enjoyed them all, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, probably thousands in the grand scheme of things. This one, I'm looking forward to intentionally picking a different leader every time I play the game to enhance my experience. I feel like they did a lot more with the mix and match. So to give it a rating, on the color scale, I'm going to give it 142 oranges over 3 bananas. I'm Chris. Thanks again for your time. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is another episode of Reviews from the Basement, but the first episode of many to come of reviewing video games. Thank you. I'm out.